The Adventures of Henry and the Sailor, Part 3. The wind howled with ferocity as the sea wanderers sailed through the darkened waters. Henry gripped the railing, his knuckles white from the force of his hold. The ship creaked and groaned as the waves slammed against it, towering like mountains in the relentless storm. Lightning streaked across the sky, illuminating the chaos of the sea for mere moments before plunging them back into darkness. "Dad!" Henry shouted, his voice barely audible over the roar of the wind. "What's happening?" Captain Finn, standing tall at the helm, didn't flinch despite the fury of the storm. His eyes were narrowed, his hands steady on the wheel, guiding the ship through the violent seas. His voice was calm, almost too calm. "Hold on tight, son. We're in the middle of a storm." Henry's heart raced. The storm was unlike any he had seen before. The wind seemed to howl with a life of its own, the waves crashing in all directions, and the thunder booming so loudly it shook the very core of the ship. "I'm scared, Dad," Henry admitted, his voice trembling despite his attempts to stay brave. "What if we capsize? What if we don't make it through?" Captain Finn glanced over his shoulder, his eyes warm but firm. "I know you're scared, son, but listen to me. We're sailors. We've faced storms before, and we'll face this one too. The sea may be powerful, but we have the skill and luck to make it through." Henry wanted to believe his father's words. Captain Finn had always been a man of strength and experience, a master of the sea. But this storm felt different. The waves were too high, the wind too fierce. It felt like nature itself was determined to swallow them whole. "How do you know we'll survive this?" Henry asked, his voice barely a whisper against the cacophony of the storm. Captain Finn gave him a small, reassuring smile. "Let me tell you a story, Henry. When I was about your age, I was sailing with my father, and we got caught in a storm much worse than this one. The ship was tossed about like a toy in a bathtub, and I thought for sure we were done for. But my father, just like I'm doing now, kept his hands steady and his mind clear. He had a saying, 'A sailor is only as good as his luck, but it's his skill that gets him through the storm.'" Henry clung to the railing, his father's words swirling in his mind, but the fear still held him tight. He had seen storms before, but none like this. The ship was tossing wildly now, and the crew was scrambling to secure the sails and tie down the rigging. The sound of wood creaking under the strain of the storm sent a chill through Henry's spine. "I don't want to be a sailor anymore, Dad," Henry admitted, his voice barely audible. "This is too scary." Captain Finn's eyes softened as he looked at his son, his hand gently resting on Henry's shoulder. "I know it's scary, son, but this is the life we chose. And no matter how hard it gets, you've got what it takes to be a sailor. You just need to trust the sea, trust your training, and trust yourself." Henry looked up at his father, trying to see the confidence in the captain's eyes, but the storm was too wild, the waves too monstrous. The ship lurched again, pitching sharply to one side. Henry stumbled, and his heart skipped a beat as he struggled to keep his footing. "Hold on," Captain Finn shouted, gripping the wheel with both hands now, his knuckles white. "We're going to have to ride this one out. Just stay close and keep your head down. The storm's not going to break easily." The wind screamed as if it were alive, pulling and pushing at the sails, trying to tear the ship apart. Henry's stomach churned, the sickening sway of the ship making him feel like he was going to fall into the abyss at any moment. But Captain Finn didn't waver. He remained at the helm, his face set in grim determination. "We've got this, Henry. We're not going anywhere. Trust in the ship, trust in me." Henry nodded, though his fear was still there, gnawing at him like an insistent wave. He couldn't shake the feeling that they were being pulled toward something dangerous, something that might just tear their ship apart. The storm continued to rage, relentless and untamable. And then, as suddenly as it had begun, the storm seemed to pause. For a brief moment, everything went still. The wind stopped howling, the waves calmed, and the dark clouds parted just enough to let a sliver of moonlight shine through. It was as though the storm had been waiting, gathering its strength for one final blow. Henry dared to glance up at the sky, his heart still pounding in his chest. He saw nothing but swirling clouds and distant lightning. But then something caught his eye. Over the horizon, beyond the last line of thunderclouds, there was a strange, almost unnatural light. At first, Henry thought it was just the last glow of the storm, but as he stared harder, he realized it wasn't the usual flash of lightning. It was steady, constant, and seemed to shine from a cluster of stars. "Dad, look!" Henry shouted, pointing to the horizon. Captain Finn turned, following his son's gaze. His eyes widened, but he said nothing, his face softening in recognition. "That's the lucky stars," Captain Finn said quietly, almost to himself. Henry stared at the cluster of stars, each one shining brightly, illuminating the waters in a soft, silver glow. It wasn't just a random constellation. It was as though the stars themselves had formed a guide, a path that would lead them safely through the storm. "I've heard stories about those stars," Captain Finn continued, his voice full of reverence. "They say that when a sailor is in trouble and the storm is too strong, the lucky stars appear to show the way home. It's a sign, Henry, a sign that we're going to make it through." Henry watched, wide-eyed, as the stars twinkled brighter, their light growing stronger, casting a guiding path through the night sky. The storm, as if acknowledging the power of the stars, began to ease. The wind slowed, and the waves softened, no longer towering above them like angry giants. "Are they real?" Henry asked, his voice filled with awe. "The lucky stars, I mean." Captain Finn nodded. "They're real, son. They've guided sailors for generations. Some say they're just a myth, a story passed down from one captain to another. But I've seen them myself, and I can tell you, they're no myth. They appear when they're needed most." Henry stood beside his father, staring at the stars. It was as though the entire world had shifted around him, and for the first time since the storm began, he felt a sense of calm settle in his chest. The lucky stars were more than just a sign of good fortune. They were a reminder that even in the most terrifying of times, there was always hope. The ship, once tossed about like a leaf in a storm, began to steady. The crew, who had been battling the fury of the storm, looked up, their faces lighting up in relief. The stars guided them, their soft glow lighting the way through the remnants of the storm. The storm finally passed, leaving the ocean calm and peaceful once more. The clouds scattered, and the moon shone brightly, casting a silver glow over the water. The wind had died down completely, and the waves, now gentle and rolling, seemed to calm the world itself. Captain Finn let out a deep breath, his grip on the wheel loosening slightly. "We made it, son. The storm's behind us." Henry could hardly believe it. The fear that had gripped him earlier had dissolved, replaced by a sense of wonder. He turned to his father, who was still watching the stars. "Do you think the lucky stars will always guide us?" Henry asked, his voice filled with awe. Captain Finn smiled and placed a hand on his son's shoulder. "I think they'll always be there when we need them most. Just like luck, son. It may not always be there, but when it is, you have to trust it." The ship sailed on, its sails now billowing gently in the wind, the water calm and serene. Henry looked up at the sky, his heart light, his fear replaced by a sense of awe and wonder. The lucky stars, like old friends, twinkled brightly overhead, guiding them through the night. As the ship cut through the calm sea, Henry felt a new sense of peace. He had faced the storm with his father, survived the fury of the seas, and learned that sometimes, even in the darkest moments, there was always a guiding light. With the stars overhead and his father by his side, Henry knew that no matter what challenges lay ahead, they would always find a way through. The sea was unpredictable, and storms could come without warning, but with skill, luck, and the guidance of the lucky stars, there was no storm they couldn't weather together. And as the night deepened, Henry lay down in his hammock, a smile playing on his lips. The storm had passed, and with it, his fear. The stars had shown him the way, and he knew now that they would always be his guiding light, no matter where the winds of the sea took them.